If you were to tell me in the Giants' 100th season that they would have this bad of a season, I would have told you you were wrong. With the 2024 NFL season officially over and with the Eagles obviously winning their Super Bowl, I think if you're a New York Giants fan, you can definitely feel the same sentiment. The New York Giants probably had the worst season in history, if not franchise history, as a fan base, as a team. They had the worst season ever. And a lot of people might look at it and see, yeah, you know who won a Super Bowl with the Eagles, and that's why they can be upset. But there was a lot more that actually happened this season. So before we officially slide into the free agency for next season, let's go ahead and recap what happened this year and explain why the New York Giants had the worst season of all time. And let's take it back to July 2nd, 2024, before the season started. Hard Knocks dropped their new series, which happens to feature the Hard Knocks offseason process with you-know-who, the New York Giants. Now, normally, when you look at a team like a Hard Knocks team, it got to be a team that's not winning. The New York Giants obviously has not been winning. But with this offseason edition being more focused on the front office, their draft process, their free agency process, why did they pick the New York Giants? Did they pick them because they made some slam dunk moves? That's definitely not what this was. We know why they picked them.
I'm going to have a tough time sleeping if Saquon goes to Philadelphia, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, Saquon Barkley signed with the Philadelphia Eagles. And that was a narrative that was definitely overcapsulating everything else that happened during the show. They head into the season without their star. And Saquon Barkley signing with the rival is one thing that Joe Schoen is going to have on his resume wherever he goes, if he goes anywhere past the New York Giants. So with the new star Malik Neighbors on the team, Daniel Jones with another year on the New York Giants, third year for Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen, they really needed to kick things into gear, win some games this year, and win over this fan base. As we all know, that did not happen. But when you looked at it, they started off 2-3. Things looked promising at one point, and maybe they can make a run in the division, within the conference. Maybe they can make some type of run. Yeah, well, that all came crashing down. The teetering point on the season for me was November 20th, taking on the Carolina Panthers in Germany. The team is on a 4-game losing streak, but they happen to be playing a team that is so bad that the Saints lost to the Panthers and fired their head coach that part of the season. Even in the early part of the season, not even the latter half of the season, they relieved him of duties for losing to the Panthers. You had players saying, we really lost to the Panthers. So there's no way this New York Giants team is that bad, right? Right.
And the Panthers have won.
Yeah, well, they lost a game and lost 5 games in a row heading into their bye week. So at that point, it was definitely the lowest part of the season. And for me, myself, as I covered the team, I was pretty assured that we were not going to have the #1 overall pick because there was a team like the Panthers still around and a couple of other teams. But the New York Giants found themselves in an area where if they couldn't beat the Panthers, they're probably not going to beat a lot of people in this season. They're not going to be. So heading into their bye week, they had to make a decision. Was Daniel Jones going to be benched, put on the side, and go in a different era? Or is Daniel Jones going to continue to play out the season and lose more games, if anything? Well, they made their decision. November 18th, they announced that Daniel Jones is benched and they're going to start Tommy DeVito. And this is where we're going to stop right here. Joe Schoen, part of that Hard Knocks series, brought in a backup quarterback because they knew Daniel Jones has an injury history and potentially there's a chance that you're going to bench Daniel Jones mid-season. So they signed a guy like Drew Lock, paid him $5 million to then go ahead and start Tommy DeVito after you bench Daniel Jones. This is the first fault of the season where I really look at it and say, man, they clearly don't know what they're doing on the field, but off the field, it's probably even worse. The biggest thing with this benching really showed that the tank is officially on and there's no way this Giants team was going to win any games the rest of the season. There's no way. Daniel Jones pretty much had his exit interview and Daniel Jones sounded very solemn. He was obviously clearly emotional and it didn't really sound like a player that's going to be on the bench. It sounded like a player that was going to be gone. Well, 6 days later, November 24th, Giants officially cut Daniel Jones. And we all know the narrative was being pushed all around the league. But even him being a safety in practice is something that took over headlines. And there was no way the Giants were going to have to carry Daniel Jones throughout the rest of the season. Clearly, he didn't want to be there. And there was no point in having him there. So they cut bait November 24th, just a year and a half after Daniel Jones got that $40 million a year contract from this same regime. So Joe Schoen, who handed him the contract, ends up cutting bait with him a year and a half after, which obviously is your GM a smart guy for doing that in the first place? Probably not. And here we are halfway through the season. Our starting quarterback's already gone. But remember, guys, we were on a 5-game losing streak. They cut bait with Daniel Jones. They said, we need a new quarterback to give us a spark. Tommy DeVito, Drew Lock, they're going to get that spark. They're going to give this team a chance and really turn things around. this team was definitely energized. Yeah, the team ended up losing 5 more games, so ultimately putting it together, a 10-game losing streak, the worst in franchise history. This team had no spark. So whatever this front office was looking for, whatever Brian Daboll was searching for, Joe Schoen was clearly out the window, and the quarterback wasn't necessarily the whole problem, because guess what? They didn't win any other games. Oh wait, you're telling me they won a game? The number 1 overall pick was in sight. The Giants had the chance to get the number 1 overall pick if they just didn't win a game, and they ended up having it at one point. But as we know, the Giants cannot do anything right. December 29th, the second to last game of the season, they take on the Indianapolis Colts, and they beat them. But not only did they beat them, they put up 40 points on the Indianapolis Colts. Now let's remind everyone what they were playing for. The Giants were playing for nothing, not trying to win a game. It felt like they were tanking. They weren't showing any effort. Brian Daboll was clearly going to be out the window. And they end up winning the game against the Colts, a team that was playing for their playoff lives. They were playing for their playoff lives, and the Giants win their first home game of the season against the Colts, ultimately pushing them back. They fell all the way back to number 4 pick. And keep in mind, this is a quarterback class that's not, full of quarterbacks. Definitely top 2 heavy. If you're not in that top 2, you're probably not getting a quarterback. And the Giants win ultimately put them out of there. So you have a team that clearly can't win. They clearly can't do things right to win, but they also can't be bad. When they're in their worst season in franchise history, they can't play bad enough. They can't tank bad enough to go ahead and get the first overall pick. This team just always had something wrong with them. And for a coach that seeming like what he was on his dying bed as a coach, he ends up revitalizing his, Giants career, loses the last game, but everyone's so sure Brian Daboll's not going to be on this team, right? There's no way Joe Schoen is going to be brought back for this team, right? After finishing the season 3-14, the worst season in franchise history, the most losses we've ever seen for a New York Giants team, the team ended up keeping the GM and the coach. And here's why this is another wrong step in their process. John Mara, being the owner, having a big say in what goes on, having the say, keeps both of them because he pretty much doesn't want to go through the process of hiring a new GM, hiring a new coach, trying to bring in somebody to reset the culture, and feels like a lot of what they do, a lot of the processes that they have, John Mara is a fan of, and feels like they're heading in the right direction. Well, they just had the worst season in franchise history. What direction do you see? The New York Giants lost 10 games in a row, lost 14 games on the season, only put up 3 wins, had one of their worst performances that we've seen offensively in a team in history, and yet no one takes the blame for it. Not a single appointed head coach, appointed GM is fired, and everybody's brought back. That's clearly a process that doesn't go on for other teams, but yet for the New York Giants, that's what happens. Oh yeah, let's not look any further as well. We had 2 NFC East teams in the playoffs making obviously splashes. So as we know, Saquon Barkley happens to be on the Eagles and he's tearing it up over there. They're making it to the Super Bowl, really because Saquon Barkley is that difference maker.
I'm going to have a tough time sleeping if Saquon goes to Philadelphia, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, Mara is still losing sleep, still to this day. But get this, with Saquon in the Super Bowl, I had Giants fans telling me to root for the Eagles because Saquon Barkley is on that team. Why shouldn't we root for the Eagles? Because Saquon Barkley's over there and we know what he is for us. We had Giants fans rooting for the Eagles. That's where it really lost me. But not only was it the fans, we saw former players making their cases as well. How can I put myself on this platform and tell Giants fans not to root for the Eagles? And then we have Michael Strahan waving a flag saying, "Go Eagles, go, fly Eagles, fly," whatever the heck they say. It was, the Giants find themselves in a crazy place right now. But before it kicks off to the Super Bowl, there's something called the Hall of Fame induction. And Eli Manning found himself on that finalist group. Eli Manning was supposed to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. He had no other quarterback that was on there that was threatening. Eli Manning was going to have his shine. This was going to be the one thing that the New York Giants had and the New York Giants fans had in their back pocket, was Eli Manning becoming a Hall of Famer. Well, even that got canceled too. The New York Giants fans could not walk away with anything this year. Not one single thing. And this is before the Super Bowl took place. And as we know, their history shows the Eagles win their Super Bowl. Saquon Barkley's on that team. So yeah, the season's finally over. And I'm glad it's over. But this season was definitely one for the ages. It can't get any worse than this, right? Guys, it can't get worse than this, right? It can't. Like, nobody, stop messing around.
I'm going to have a tough time sleeping.
Well, we'll see what happens next year.